All right, good morning, folks. This is Ken, and my guest, as I told you, if you follow me on Facebook and Twitter, my guest today is Dr. David Ryan from Mass General Hospital. And first of all, Doctor, welcome to the... you told me to call you Dave.
Yes.
It's going to be tough for me to do that because I constantly reminded of your credentials.
No, Dave.
All right. Dave, you are not only the head of oncology at Mass General Hospital, which is, in most minds, I think, in your field, the greatest, or one of the greatest oncology hospitals in the world.
Yeah, we like to think so.
Right. I think it's well earned. I mean, even I, as a young kid, recognized it when John Wayne went there. I was like, John Wayne is in Mass General. It's got to be the best. But it's just a renowned hospital, and so you're a very accomplished guy. And I don't want to embarrass you or anything, but your book here, Living with Cancer, is probably a very important book for people that are going through this, and that means a lot of people. Living with Cancer is a step-by-step guide for coping medically and emotionally with a serious diagnosis. A lot of times, people go to the hospital for something they think is nothing serious, and they get this devastating news. Sometimes people have a funny feeling, and they're prepared to hear this stuff. But walk me through this. How did you come to write this book?
So I was with Vicki Jackson, and Vicki Jackson is the chief of palliative care at Mass General, and we have this course where we teach the residents and the house staff how to care for folks up on the inpatient service at Mass General with cancer. And we were waiting for the residents to kind of get together, and we started talking, and we were talking about how often we get phone calls from family and friends, and just really every night driving home, I think I'm calling somebody back who called me and said, "Hey, Dave, can you talk to my aunt, or can you talk to my sister's husband," and all sorts of connections where we have to call folks back and talk to them about their cancer diagnosis. And Vicki said, "I do exactly the same thing." And so I said, "Why don't we write a book about just that, something that could be a resource for folks who are diagnosed with cancer, serious cancers, and are going through it." And we had this idea to come up with a book where you didn't need to have a friend or a brother who's an oncologist or a palliative care specialist, but you could have a book to go to guide you through it. And it turns out that there was this great need out there for it, and it's really been a home run.
Your specialty, what is your area, your specialty in the oncology? So
I'm a medical oncologist. So I went through internal medicine training, and then after internal medicine training, you go through medical oncology training, which is another 3 years. And then in that, I'm a subspecialist in gastrointestinal cancers. So the focus of my practice typically is colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, stomach cancer.
So some of the toughest to diagnose early.
Yes. Yeah. No, those are tough cancers. But we've been making great strides in the last several years, and there's a ton of hope right now in the cancer field. In fact, it's the most exciting area of medicine, I think, right now, where there are tons of breakthroughs that are coming through.
Pancreatic?
Pancreatic even. We actually think we have our foot in the door in pancreatic cancer. In fact, our group up at Mass General just got a Stand Up to Cancer Award, those national awards. Mm-hmm. We got a Stand Up to Cancer Award for people with localized pancreatic cancer. We think it's based on a trial we did up at Mass General, and we really do think we have our foot in the door now, where this particular trial, it's been amazing. We are taking people who previously the surgeon said to us, "I can't get it out," locally advanced pancreatic cancer. And we have the world's greatest pancreatic surgeons. And we started with this preoperative chemotherapy regimen followed by radiation. It's a novel regimen, and it turns out that we've been able to convert more than half the folks to resectable, meaning the surgeon can get it out. And now 2 years down the road, half the folks where the surgeon gets it out are free of their cancer. So we on the basis of that, we put in a grant to Stand Up to Cancer. They loved it, and we got awarded. So
is it still a matter of getting it in time, or?
It's still a matter of getting it in time. So these are for folks who have localized disease, but as I said, I think our foot's in the door, and now we got to put our shoulder behind it and burst it open. But just like it's being burst open for melanoma and breast cancer and lung cancer.
My dad died of Hodgkin's lymphoma in November. He died in June of '66. Went into the hospital, 9 months early, never came out. 34 years old, school teacher, 15% curable. At that time. Now it's almost 100% curable.
Hodgkin's is incredibly curable, and that's how fast the breakthrough happens. When it happens, it goes from 20, 30% to 80, 90% seemingly overnight. It's about a 5-year process, but the science is such right now that we're starting to see these breakthroughs in the individual types of cancers. And of course, cancers 1,000 different illnesses. Everybody's got a rare cancer, because even something like colon cancer it's a garbage bag term. Colon cancer probably accounts for 10 or 15 different cancers that we all.
It's an umbrella of various cells that react differently. And
exactly.
Okay. That's I think the confusing thing about cancer for the layperson is that they think that why can they cure some forms of skin cancer or lymphomas but not pancreatic? There's a whole family of reasons why. For example, the pancreatic treatment is not going to react the same way as another part of the body, or because it's almost a different disease. It's just under the same
right.
name, I guess.
So umbrella, the cancer umbrella, it composes hundreds of different diseases, and even within a specific diagnosis like lung cancer or skin cancer, there are multiple different diseases within that subtype. Wow. And so, as I said, everybody's got a rare cancer in that sense, because cancer is it's an accumulation of the genetics you're born with. So the genes you're born with. So to take a step back, cancer is an illness of genes. The genes get mutated. Either you're born with a certain number of mutations, and then over a lifetime of living, those cells that you have acquire mutations. Those genes acquire mutations, and then ultimately that leads to a cancer growing. So
acquire, you mean through environment?
Through the environment, through bad luck. We think most of it is just bad luck, in the sense of every time that a cell divides, it's making mistakes. And over a course of a lifetime, you have billions and billions of cells in your body, and there are billions of divisions that are going on, and mistakes get made. And if you have enough mistakes in the genes that are responsible for telling the cell to grow, or in the genes that are responsible for slowing the cell down, the braking mechanism, as soon as you get enough mutations in either the accelerator portion of the genome or the braking portion of the genome, you're going to get a cancer. And so cancer is really, it's a disease of aging. The older you get, the higher the likelihood of you developing cancer.
So what is it, the messaging from the one generation to the next that's lost between the cells? The next.
Well, that can be, but if you think about it, it's like an analogy that I like to use all the time is the garden analogy. And cancers are like weeds, or just dandelions. If you look at your grass from year to year, the cancer is like a dandelion that develops and then spreads throughout your lawn. And if you don't get it out by the roots when it's early, then it's going to spread throughout the rest of the lawn. Every lawn has dandelions in it, and it's just a function of the seeds being present within the cells of our body.
And I guess it's a form of being a detective, because you have to find out what the cancer, what does it need in order to progress? What does it want? What does it need? And can you starve out cancer? Is that a strategy? I'm fascinated by it all, because I understand there's many different solutions to various forms of cancer, but it's a very interesting field.
Well, so there's two major breakthroughs, and you're hitting on it right there with the question. So the two major breakthroughs that are going on in cancer medicine right now are, one, the breakthrough of targeted therapy, and that is figuring out what are the genes that are mutated, and do those genes do they act like an Achilles heel, or is there an Achilles heel to that cancer diagnosis? So can we match that genetic mutation with a drug that shuts down that particular pathway? Sometimes people get a cancer that has a genetic mutation that, for all intents and purposes, acts like gasoline on the cell and makes it grow. Oh. And if you have a drug that can come in and shut off that pathway, that cancer cell dies, and that we refer to as targeted therapy. And so to understand whether your cancer is amenable to targeted therapy, you have to understand the genes, the genetic mutations of that cancer, and that's called molecular pathology. The second major breakthrough that's happening right now is revving up the immune system to go after the cancer cell. And it turns out that we're actually doing that in two separate ways. One way where we figured out how the cancer evades the immune system through expressing a series of proteins called checkpoint proteins, which is the same way that your normal cells turn off the immune system when, say, you get the flu. Say you get the flu and your lungs get completely inflamed with the flu virus and really with the immune response against that flu virus. Well, your body has to shut off the immune response when the situation starts to get under control. It does so through a series of what we call checkpoint proteins. Well, we've now understood that cancer co-opts the same mechanism to hide from the immune system. So when you have a cancer cell that's growing in your body, even if your immune system can see it, sometimes that cancer cell will express this protein.
It's got the proper papers to get by.
And it has the proper, it's like saying, it's like a big police officer saying, there's nothing to see here, move on.
Yeah.
And the T cells of the body move on and don't go after that cancer cell. It turns out we now have drugs. That you're seeing the ads on TV all the time, Opdivo, Keytruda, where the patient with lung cancer comes out, it's cloudy, and then they get the drug and it's blue sky. And what these drugs do is they basically are antibodies that come in and cover up those proteins so the T cells, your own body's T cells, can go after the cancer and kill it. So there's two huge breakthroughs going on in cancer medicine right now: targeted therapy and immune therapy.
Is competition a good thing? I mean, if Johns Hopkins, if they come with some sort of breakthrough, do they share information, or is it competitive where it's important to make sure that your group, your body of doctors get the credit for this breakthrough or that breakthrough? How is that?
So there is a little bit of competition. We all want to be the first to find a new treatment or a new breakthrough in medicine. But I have to say that for instance, the guys down at Hopkins I know very well. We all know each other really well. It turns out it's a small world within these fields. And in fact, I was just on email yesterday, emailing the guys saying, hey, do you have anything new for pancreatic cancer? Or do you have anything new for colon cancer? And so you're constantly sharing what's going on and what you're experiencing. So while there is competition, I'd say that the field of medicine is populated by folks who really just want to help patients get better. Sure. And so I'm constantly on the phone or constantly on email with my buddies at Hopkins or Sloan Kettering or even across town over at the Dana-Farber to say, hey, what's going on, guys? And can you help me out here? I have a patient with such and such gene mutation. Do you have any good clinical trials, or do you have any good therapies going on there? And so
genetic therapy,
genetic therapies, immunotherapies, anything. Mm-hmm. And so you're constantly in communication with your colleagues across the country and really across the world, trying to find newer, better therapies for your patients.
This is an odd question, but I used to know the answer to this, I think. But how many generations of cells in the average person? Say you live 75 years, 85 years.
I don't know.
Is it? I mean, is it different for each person?
Well, it's different for each organ, and it's different for each tissue. Yeah. So some of the tissues have a faster turnover. So, for instance, the bone marrow, you're constantly making new red cells, white cells, and platelets. The skin is constantly turning over from sun damage, and so you're constantly replacing that. The GI tract is one of the faster cells that turn over. Liver, lungs, less so.
What's interesting is, as we see through time, the species itself seems to improve, seems to progress And, whether you call it evolution or however, macro, micro, whatever you believe, the creature itself seems to progress. Yet the organism, each generation of cells that replaces the next are lesser.
Well, so that's an interesting, that's an interesting scientific and biologic question. So it turns out that I think what you're getting at with your question is that with each successive generation of cells, there's more and more mutations that are accumulated within that cell. And it's really only a matter of time before that cell acquires enough mutations to become dysfunctional, whether it's dysfunctional in a cancer pathway or it's dysfunctional in another disease pathway. And, by and large, that's the process of aging.
Sure.
When you think about it.
Sure. And I mean, the goal is to slow it down, right?
Exactly. The goal
You're not going to stop it.
Slow it down. Yep.
All right. So getting to this book, have you gotten any feedback from any patients?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I think, one of the things about having cancer is that it's incredibly intimidating to have cancer. And sometimes when you go into the office, you remember only half or a third of what the doctor or the nurse practitioner said to you. So to have a resource that you can come back to is incredibly powerful, and say, what did he say? What did she say? And then there it is in the chapter,
sure.
Spelled out for you. The other big thing in the big idea in the book was this idea of combining palliative care and oncologic care at the same time to give a better result for patients. And so Vicki and I, we were part of this big experiment 15 years ago where we were thrown together in clinic. We were both young attendings, she in palliative care and I'm in oncologic care. And palliative care typically or historically came out of the inpatient setting. People have tremendous symptoms, they're in tremendous pain, or they're suffering from some symptom, and we developed this subspecialty called palliative care, which is this intensive symptom management group. Well, we were thrown into this experiment of seeing patients together in the outpatient setting, patients who had cancer. I didn't think I needed palliative care help with my patients, and the palliative care doctors always looked at the oncologists as just chemo doctors. They'll give chemo to anybody, and they don't really take care of their patients. There was this misconception on both sides. And Vicki and I found that together we could take better care of patients than we ever could alone. And so that's the other big idea in the book.
How do people get the book?
So you can get it on Amazon. You can get it at Barnes & Noble. It's available at all the online sites.
It's called Living with Cancer, and it's a book written by Vicki Jackson, by David Ryan, and Michelle Seaton, all real experts, world-renowned experts in their fields battling cancer. And the pain management, that is where there's been a lot of progress. People are dying much more comfortably than they were a few decades ago or even a couple of decades ago.
Yes, they are. So we do by and large, I tell patients that 95% of the time we can manage your symptoms very, very well, including pain. I should say it's a real topic right now that's in the public eye. It turns out that we have a shortage of narcotics in all the hospitals, particularly IV narcotics. So, for instance,
you're in New Bedford, so you're in good luck.
No, but it's a serious issue. So, at Mass General now, our supply of intravenous narcotics, like intravenous fentanyl, intravenous morphine, and intravenous Dilaudid, we're down under 2 weeks. So there's people we're starting to seriously consider rationing intravenous narcotics, and this is all because it's multi-layered, but one of the big pushes of regulation in the last several years, and it's due to the terrible opioid epidemic. I'm not
the wrong market's getting the bulk of it, I guess.
But the regulations have really dampened the enthusiasm of producers to make these narcotics, and so now there's a nationwide shortage of intravenous narcotics.
We hear municipalities and states, maybe the federal government, going after these opioid companies.
Yeah, no, and so if you're a company, you're like, why do I want to deal with this? I'm not gonna make this product anymore, because you don't make a lot of money off of particularly the generic forms of morphine and fentanyl, and so it's a terrible thing what's going on with the opioid epidemic. But on the flip side, we have patients who have real end-stage illnesses like cancer who need IV narcotics to die comfortably. And we really are facing a shortage. So
that's terrible.
I would say pay attention to that in the news in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, that should not be the case. I mean, that should be compartmentalized. People should be comfortable.
Correct.
That's all. I wasn't aware of that. All right. Let's take a phone call, Doctor, and start right here. Good morning. Thanks for your patience. You're on the air with Dr. David Ryan.
Ken and Doctor. I know two people who passed away from pancreatic cancer, and one of them was a doctor. And he told me that the pancreatic cancer has the ability to disguise itself as everything else. And when you finally find out you have cancer, it's too late.
I think you touched on that, so that the immune system's not recognizing the cancer. It's accepting that the cancer might belong there and doesn't attack it.
Right. So pancreatic cancer is one of those cancers that the immune system doesn't see very well at all. And the other thing with pancreatic cancer, two other things with pancreatic cancer that make it so deadly. One is that the pancreas itself, there's not a lot of pain fibers. So if you have a tumor that's growing there, you don't really have any symptoms unless it obstructs the bile duct. If it's close to the bile duct and you get jaundice, that can be in some ways lucky because it can be picked up earlier. But most of the tumors in the pancreas, you don't get symptoms until it spreads outside of the pancreas where there are pain fibers. And then the second thing about pancreatic cancer, and we don't understand it, is that it does spread early. So it tends to go earlier than other cancers to the liver or the other parts of the abdominal cavity or even the lungs. And so even a small tumor that's 1 centimeter in size has a 80% likelihood of being someplace else in the body, even though it's only 1 centimeter in size. So it's one of those cancers that tends to spread earlier, and we just don't understand it.
Any other questions, Jay?
Thank you.
All right, Jay. Thanks for the call.
Have a good day.
All right. Yeah, I didn't realize that small. I guess that would explain the problem. I mean, even a small one. Yeah,
but even we think 1 centimeter of a cancer. So 1 centimeter, a little less than half an inch. That's about 1 billion cancer cells. So even that, it's amazing that you can have a 1 centimeter lung cancer, for instance, has a much higher cure rate than a 1 centimeter pancreatic cancer. So a 1 centimeter lung cancer is cured the majority of the time, but a 1 centimeter pancreatic cancer is only cured 20% of the time. And so that disconnect we don't really understand. It has to do with that cancer, kind of like getting back to the weed analogy. There are some weeds that just can thrive anywhere, and so pancreatic cancer is one of those cancer cells that can thrive in the liver and the lung and the rest of the abdominal cavity at a much higher rate than other cancers.
Dave, you obviously get into this to help people, to save people, and sometimes it doesn't always work out, as you, I'm sure, know better than all of us. If it's not impossible, it has to be the next thing to it, the closest thing to it, is to not get emotionally involved with these human patients of yours. It's got to be tough. It's going to be a roller coaster.
Oh, yeah. No, it's a roller coaster. But it's a wonderful roller coaster. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I think it's a terrific profession. And I've had the opportunity to help people out. I've had the opportunity to help people be cured, but I've also had the opportunity to just help care for people and relieve their suffering. And, looking back, I've been doing this now for 20 years. I can honestly say that it's been incredibly rewarding. I know there's a ton of doctors out there who complain about their profession, and people have this sense now that doctors are
disgruntled.
And I have to say, I think oncology in particular and being a physician is just tremendous. I mean, at the end of the day, you look back on your life, it's really about, what you did with your God-given talents to help other people, survive this thing called life and just get by. And so to have the opportunity to use your talents in this way. And even if you can't cure people, I mean, I know everybody's had the experience of having somebody die with cancer. The relief that you feel when you can call somebody and there's somebody on the other end of the line who's going to be your advocate and look out for you and take care of you, and call in the nausea medicine and call in the pain medicine, and just give you really good advice. I mean, like the thanks that you get back from patients just for doing the simple things is incredibly rewarding. So I would say it's been a great profession, and I wouldn't be sad if any of my kids went into it. It's a wonderful thing to be.
I know there's Dr. David Ryan's Don't Fall Off of Trees, and this book was motivated by the fact that you can't be everywhere and make all these calls. There's only so many, even if you wanted to, and I'm sure that you do, there's just only so many hours in the day. So this sort of like gives you a massive amount of information if you can't reach Dr. David Ryan or somebody like him. It's living with cancer. We had a small interaction in a way. So your father-in-law, Jack Markey, is a friend of mine and somebody that I admire. And he called me when Jack Peterson was ill, the former news guy here, and long time, just a brilliant voice here on WBSM. And you reached out to Jack Peterson. Unfortunately, it was just days before he had passed away. But you tried to see what you could do. I mean, so you're inundated with these calls. You don't seem to mind very much. I can see the need for this book.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, the book is really meant to be kind of a what to expect when you're expecting. Everybody knows that book about pregnancy. This is meant to be that same kind of book, but for cancer. And I get a ton of phone calls. I mean, and I don't mind answering them. In fact, from the South Coast, from New Bedford, as you say, my father-in-law is Jack Markey, and I became a card-carrying member of the Markey family back in 1992. Yeah, you did. And as our president would say, they are huge. They're all over New Bedford, and it's been one of the great joys of my life to answer all these phone calls from New Bedford and help people out. I mean, they really, and whether they have cancer or just trying to get up to Mass General, it's been a great experience.
I think one of the most challenging things for a doctor in your field has to be managing expectations for patients.
Oh, so you touched on, I mean, so there's a technical term for that. We call it prognostic awareness. And it's probably the hardest thing that we have to get across. And Vicki and I, along with Michelle, who's a professional writer who helped us out, we spent a ton of time trying to develop the chapters around prognostic awareness. And that means that does the patient sitting across from you understand the way we understand it, like what's going to happen? I'll give you a great example that happened to me yesterday. One of my good friends, unfortunately, has just been diagnosed with prostate cancer, and it's localized right now as far as we know, but he's undergoing the staging of it, and I've been helping him out. And I get a text. I'm at work.
What is the staging?
Oh, so staging is when we determine, is the cancer localized or is it spread? Is it stage 1, 2, 3, or 4? So stages 1 is a localized cancer. Stages 2 and 3 fall into locally advanced, meaning it is usually spread through the wall of the organ or the tissue that it's in, and then, or it's in the surrounding lymph nodes. And then stage 4 is when it's metastatic. So I got this panic text yesterday. I'm seeing patients in clinic, and he's a good buddy of mine from college, and he's like, "You got a second?" And so in between patients, I give him a call, and I say, "What's up?" And he's like, I was up all night. I'm sitting here. I'm going for my bone scan today. He goes, if the bone scan's positive, is that it? Is the ball game over? Am I done? And I went, no. What it means, it's a big step, but it's the difference between being curable and incurable. But if the bone scan's positive and the prostate cancer has spread to the bones, that doesn't mean you're going to die tomorrow. It doesn't mean you're going to die in 6 months, and it probably doesn't mean you're going to die for a couple of years, if not many, many years, but it does mean that it's not curable anymore. We can treat it, we can manage it.
So you can die with it.
And you will die, you will probably die with it and maybe and from it, but it doesn't mean that tomorrow everything's going to end, or it doesn't mean that in 6 months everything's going to end. We will manage this together over the course of time. But it's the difference when you're diagnosed with stage 4 as prostate cancer as opposed to localized stage 1 or 2 prostate cancer. It's the difference between the cancer becoming curable, or that's our goal, versus incurable. Our goal is to help you live as well as you can for as long as you can. And that could be 2 years, that could be 5 years, that could be 10 plus years. And I think that's prognostic awareness, having that ability to say, what's my best case scenario, what's my worst case scenario, and what's likely to happen.
I think that's maybe the culture shock for the public when it comes to progress in battling cancer, is that we're accustomed, for the last few decades of hearing about prognosis is 6 months, 3 months, 1 year, but now we're seeing it stretch.
Oh yeah, so the greatest example is melanoma, right? It used to be that you were diagnosed with metastatic melanoma, and there was not a lot we could do. People died over the course of 6 to 12 months. Now, when I see somebody with metastatic disease in the hospital, so I used to say to the fellows that when somebody comes into Mass General and let's say they have liver nodules or lung nodules, and we're trying to figure out what kind of cancer it was, we used to say, okay, let's say a little prayer that it's not melanoma. That's what we did 10 years ago because there wasn't much we could do. Now, when you're walking in the room, you're like, okay, guys, let's say a little prayer it's melanoma, because we think we can maybe even cure metastatic melanoma. Look at Jimmy Carter. It's just amazing what's going on. Now, that's not everybody, but it gives hope to everybody. And I think the average survival now for all of the big cancers is in the years. It's in the 3, 4, 5 years. When I first started, another example, colon cancer. If you had metastatic colon cancer in your liver or your lungs, you had one maybe a 1 to 2% chance of being alive 5 years down the road.
Wow.
Now you have a 25% chance of being alive 5 years down the road. With metastatic disease, you're living with the metastatic disease. You're on and off chemotherapy, and you're doing very, very well.
So instead of 1 in 50 or 1 in 100, you were 1 of 4 that would survive. That is a great stride, I guess.
Yes. No, it's been tremendous, and I think that there are many people who have metastatic cancer that are living well with their cancer for years with their cancer, on and off treatment, and as their physician, you get to know them incredibly well. That you're seeing them every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, and they're on and off treatment for years and years. And so, our hope is that when we first meet somebody, that they can be the best chance at the best case scenario, that even if we can't cure them, that they can do well for 5+ years or 10+ years with cancer.
When we come back, I'm going to take a commercial break. When we come back, I want to talk about two things. The advanced message and the maybe dangerous market for holistic solutions over what you do.
Sure.
And we'll do that. I have another topic, too, but I want to take a commercial break. We're a little bit behind here, so we'll return in just a moment. You're listening to Dr. David Ryan, who is the author of a book, Living with Cancer, and your questions are more than welcome at 508-996-0500. We have a couple on hold right now. We'll get to you right after this. You're listening to The Ken Pittman Show on AM 1420 WBSM. All right, we are back here on WBSM. This is The Ken Pittman Show. My guest, if you're just joining us, is Dr. David Ryan from the Mass General Hospital, where he is the head of oncology. And he wrote a book that I think is very important for millions. I would highly recommend it. It's called Living with Cancer. And as you said, you can get it at Amazon. Is it in bookstores as well?
Yes. Yep. Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Sure.
And so your co-author, Vicki Jackson. Who's Vicki Jackson?
So Vicki is the chief of palliative care at Mass General. She's a great doctor and a great friend. So Vicki runs the palliative care program, and palliative care is a subspecialty in medicine where physicians specialize in symptom management. And so we think it's very important, particularly in cancer medicine, that if you have a serious cancer diagnosis, that your chances of doing as well as you can for as long as you can are better when you're co-managed with a palliative care physician and an oncologist. Unfortunately, there's just not enough palliative care physicians to go around. So even at Mass General, we don't have a palliative care physician for everybody with cancer. But for everybody who has serious problems from their cancer, we try and match up both the oncologist and a palliative care physician for that particular patient.
Michelle Seaton, who's that?
So Michelle is a professional writer. She's terrific. Michelle helped us keep, doctors tend to talk in doctor speak. And so Vicki, the way the book is set up is I wrote a chapter and then Vicki wrote a chapter. And so you got the medical oncology viewpoint and then the palliative care viewpoint. And Vicki helped keep the voices consistent. I mean, not Vicki, Michelle Seaton, our writer, helped keep the voices consistent, and also was a great pushback to us when she would say, "Hey, Dave, Vicki, that's doctor speak. You can't talk like that."
Yeah, the vernacular that you use, it's got to go to the masses.
Yeah, so Michelle did a tremendous job of organizing the language for us and keeping the voice consistent.
All right. Today we see. I'll give you a comparison. I think not that long ago, orthopedic surgeons, orthopedic doctors really frowned on chiropractic care as a holistic option or solution. And really they frowned upon it and didn't recommend it to their patients. They now seem to be a bit more open. But I think it's, at the same time, some of these holistic messages that would say go to this as opposed to Dr. David Ryan's approach to cancer, and they're well financed. This is nothing new. I think it's more challenging today because there's a big industry behind holistic solutions. I remember going far back, Chad Green and the Laetrile, when the parents got arrested for bringing him down to Mexico, and so it's nothing new, but they're getting more powerful in terms of their convincing message and their marketing, that sort of thing. Is this what's your opinion of all this?
So holistic medicine or alternative medicine, it falls under a huge umbrella of terms. I would say that most of the patients that really seek out alternative medicine and holistic approaches, they're seeking out hope. And what a lot of the programs are pushing is hope, in a word. And what we've found is that people who go overboard on holistic approaches or alternative approaches, they tend to be more depressed, more anxious, feeling more hopeless than the average cancer patient. Now, there are some holistic approaches that do help people feel better. And there's nothing wrong with feeling better. So, for instance, at MGH, we have massage. We have some forms of acupuncture. We have music therapy. We have art therapy. Anything that can help you cope better and doesn't hurt you is fine with us, and it's fine with me. And so what I tell patients is if this makes you feel better, if this helps you cope better with your cancer, I'm all for it. I'm totally into it. But don't think that your holistic approach is going to treat the cancer per se. It's not going to shrink the tumor. It's not going to cure the tumor. It's going to help you feel better and cope better with your cancer. It's not going to help you be cured of that cancer.
Okay. I can tell you, I met somebody down here who went to a holistic approach, had pancreatic stage, I don't know if it was stage 3 or 4, but he seems to be clean now, and it was a holistic thing. Is that really chance? I mean, is it just, how does something like that happen?
So most of the stories that you hear when you dive into them, people didn't understand their own prognosis or people didn't understand their own cancer. And so the way they describe it to friends and family is actually not correct. It's not the correct way. Having said that, though, there is always a chance. You never say never in cancer, and you never say always. So
you don't know what you don't know.
You don't, right. And there's always a small chance, even in something like colon cancer. I have treated folks where, and this is a handful over the course of 20 years, colon cancer, pancreatic cancer. I've had a handful of patients who've had a nodule in the lung or a nodule in the liver, and it just went away. Just went away. And we knew it was cancer. We knew it was biopsied, and it just went away. And we think scientifically what happened is that somehow the immune system got activated and recognized it and killed it. And particularly now that we have these immune-based therapies that are revolutionizing some of the cancers, that's what we think happens in that 1% of patients where they had a nodule or two and it just disappeared. Now, the patient is always going to say it was because of it was the shark cartilage that I did. So if 100 patients do shark cartilage and one of them has a miraculous response, it's really probably the miracle. It's not so much the shark cartilage, it's the miracle of your T cells getting activated against that cancer.
Dave, is there any way to go back forensically and see exactly why this person's nodule went away? Is there any way of monitoring? It's water under the bridge? We don't know what happened, and there's no way of.
No, unfortunately, there's no way of accurately figuring out for sure what happened. Now, having said that, there are many natural products that eventually become medicines. Some of the chemotherapies, in fact, that we use are based on natural products. So there's in a lot of the holistic literature or alternative medicine literature, there's a kernel of truth. Like one of the big ones that patients always ask me right now is, Dave, I need to be on a low sugar diet because sugar feeds cancer.
Heard it.
Right? So there's almost no way for you to manage your sugar in such a way when you're on chemotherapy that is going to get it to the level to low enough to
you can't eat straw.
No, you can't eat straw. That's number one. And number two, the kernel of truth that they're taking it from is from these laboratory studies where in the laboratory dish, cells don't grow without sugar. Well, of course cells don't grow without sugar. The other big one is if I can get the pH of my body down, then the cells won't grow in a low pH. There's no way on God's green earth that you can control the pH of your cells, what your cells are seeing inside your body by what you're eating. The pH level in your body is a tightly regulated biological process that there's no way that what you can eat can regulate that. So we see patients coming in all the time trying to eat really low sugar diets and to control their body's pH. And you just explain to the patients, look, it's good to eat well, and you don't want your sugars to run high, but it's not going to treat the cancer, and we don't want you to hurt yourself. So sometimes we've had to tell folks, look, you're going to hurt yourself if you continue to go in this direction. And sometimes people listen to us, and sometimes they don't.
508-996-0500. You're listening to Dr. David Ryan in his book, Living with Cancer, which is something that I think helps people to cope with the news and what to expect once you get the news. And I think that probably means more than 3/4 of you will eventually want to have this book because there's not enough cell phone minutes on Dr. David Ryan's plan to answer everybody. Let's go to the phones. Good morning. You're on the air.
Yes, Ken. Can I ask a question to your guest?
Yep.
I went to Mass General. I had Dr. Fernandez up there. He did a Whipple procedure on me. And this doctor was mentioning sugar. I don't drink coffee per se, but I do have one coffee every day in the morning. Is that something I should be staying away from, or is that... What's your suggestion on that? Would you have a suggestion?
Yeah, so coffee is one coffee a day is totally fine. In fact,
yep.
You're probably it's in the popular literature now, but there was a study that came out 20 plus years ago that linked coffee drinking to pancreatic cancer. That study was incredibly flawed and has since been disproven. So there's no link between coffee and pancreatic cancer right now. Thankfully, right?
We both have coffees in front of us.
We're just sitting here drinking our coffee. So you can go ahead and drink your coffee, and your doctor, Carlos Fernandez del Castillo, is just one of the greatest physicians on the planet. And he's just one of the greatest human beings. He is
very personal, and boy, I'll tell you, he's God. That's all I can tell you.
Probably not. I'm just going to say that, but
he's as close as they come. I'll tell you, I love the man. So
can I ask you a question?
Sure.
I don't know if I can do it over the air, but
I'm going to let you ask it, and then I'm going to hang up so we can get to other callers. But go ahead.
His wife, I know, had a problem. How's she doing? Can you tell me that?
Well,
no.
Let's move on. Thanks for the call. Thanks for joining us. You're on the air.
Good morning, Ken. This is Hans Doherty calling. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Hans. Good.
Great topic. You know, cancer is absolutely one of those diseases that affects every single family, so thanks for bringing it up. I just had a question for the doctor. I'm curious to know if cannabis, medical cannabis, is being an option or something that's being suggested in the medical community as an alternative.
Yeah, that question's going to be more relevant. Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. I'm gonna let him answer while we hang up because we're short on time, Hans. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So cannabis, or in the vernacular, pot, weed, Mary Jane. So it's been around forever. So pot or cannabis. So what we generally tell our patients is that there are some symptoms that pot can help with. Some people in some patients, it can improve your appetite. In some patients, it can relieve anxiety. In some patients, it can even help with some pain control. What most doctors feel about pot is that it's a little like the jack of all trades, master of none. So for pain control, we have very good narcotics. For hunger, we have other medications. For anxiety, we have even better medications than pot. Having said that, some people really get benefit in terms of feeling better from pot, and if they want to do it, then that's totally fine. The problem that I have with pot or the proponents of marijuana is that they say that it treats the cancer. It actually doesn't treat the cancer. There's no scientific evidence that marijuana or any of the cannabinoids
fall under wishful thinking, maybe.
Yeah, that falls under wishful thinking, and that's not going to make your cancer go away. And unfortunately, some of the proponents are making their patients buy a very expensive cannabis oil to try and treat their cancer, and you watch people waste money down the drain that way.
David, we never discussed how long you were going to stay. You stayed the entire hour, and I have to thank you. I would, if you have more time.
Sure,
we have
I
more
can
callers.
spend more time. Sure.
All right, why don't we bring this to 10:20?
Okay, sure.
Is that good?
Yeah, whatever you want.
All right, so those of you who did not get on, we're going to keep you online. You'll be first coming out of the news break. Don't go away. All right, 508-996-0500. You're listening to the Ken Pittman Show here on AM 1420 WBSM. My guest is Dr. David Ryan. If you're just joining us, Dr. Ryan is one of the leading voices, and some would say the best oncologist for certain kinds of cancer. And he's the head of oncology at Mass General Hospital. He's got a book that he co-wrote with Vicki Jackson. And Michelle Seaton is a professional writer who helped to translate some of their terminology so that the layperson would understand it. It's called Living with Cancer, and it's designed to answer a lot of questions about what to expect. The reason I think it's so important is because I think we all have the impression of old news. So cancer means you got 6 months, that's it. You got cancer, you're done in 6 months. And this book helps you understand that things are progressing better than a lot of people might understand.
They sure are. Yeah, they really are. And I would say, to give you an idea of how exciting cancer medicine is, it is the area that a lot of the medical residents want to go into. So when I went in, I was a medical resident I graduated medical school in 92 and came out of residency in 95. And in my class that year of about 35 residents, I was at Columbia down in New York. Only one of us, me, went into medical oncology and did a subspecialty. So medical oncology is you do another 3 years of subspecialty training after your internal medicine training. Now it's, if not the most popular, almost the most popular subspecialty training fellowship that we see our guys going into at Mass General, and really all of the great academic medical centers across the country. And the reason is that there's just a lot going on.
I think there's not this lion's share of the news. So you're not going to see on the front page of the paper one day, cancer is cured, because there's just so many different things. And as we talked about in the last hour, there's some things that certain cancers will react to and some things that they're impervious to.
Yeah, and each of these cancers that people can get, lung cancer, colon cancer, there are 10, 15, sometimes 20 different types of cancer. There's a great story going on in lung cancer. There's what's called ALK mutant lung cancer and EGF mutant lung cancer, and these account for small percentages of patients. But if you have that type of lung cancer, you go on a pill, and while we can't cure that lung cancer, you can remain stable on that pill for years sometimes, and so and live and do fantastically well. So each of these cancers is a different disease. So when we say we're going to cure cancer, we're going to cure individual types of cancer, but not the whole kit and caboodle.
All right. So the most important thing, I think, when it comes to cancer therapy is, well, there's one that's sort of proactive, and there's one that's reactive down the road, and so the therapy for enhancing the immune system is a reactive solution to a cancer that exists. But down the road, eventually the genetic therapy could prevent cancers from happening in the first place. Is that right?
Well, So there's two things that are happening. Prevention is we're probably not going to use immune therapy, at least in the next 20 years, to work at preventing cancer. Prevention is, for the next 20 years, is going to focus on a healthier lifestyle. So what we were talking about before, what are the risk factors for cancer? Well, the two big ones in the United States are smoking and obesity. So if you're overweight or if you smoke, those are the two biggest risk factors for cancer. And so as the population stops smoking, that's a really good thing. But our generation's big risk factor, our generation's smoking, is being overweight. And so overweight, it's like having too much fertilizer on your grass.
Maximizing the chance for growth.
Yeah, it maximizes the chance for growth, and these cancer cells are going to grow out of control. So those are the two big things. But the holy grail that may come in the next 10 years is finding cancers early so you can cut them out when everything is stage 1. And the way we're going to do that most likely is with blood-based technology. So imagine 5 years from now, you turn 40 and you go to your doctor and you just get a blood test, and it tells you whether you have circulating cancer cells or circulating cancer DNA. Circulating cancer DNA is called circulating tumor DNA or cell-free DNA, and circulating cancer cells are referred to as circulating tumor cells or CTCs.
And this is prior to metastasizing?
This is prior to metastasizing. The technology exists now. And so studies are just getting underway looking at healthy people like you and me and getting blood tests, right? And because the problem is, people always say, oh, I had a cancer and, 3 months made a difference. If I had just caught that cancer 3 months earlier. It turns out, like for most solid cancers, colon cancer, lung cancer, you had that cancer 5 years ago. You just didn't know it. We couldn't see it.
Wow.
But we can pick it up in the bloodstream potentially, and that's the holy grail. If we can get that, and we actually think the technology exists, we actually think we may get there within the next 10 years for certain types.
And I'm noticing, at least in sports medicine, the incisions are far less invasive. They're far more consolidated. It's not like you have to cut somebody wide open in some situations. Is it the same for cancer treatment? Yeah, so
we refer to that as minimally invasive techniques. And these minimally invasive techniques are usually done with tiny incisions like a laparoscope or a thoracoscope or robotic surgery. These are minimally invasive approaches where the surgeons of today are basically playing really cool video games. Like the kids, so parents don't despair.
Your kids are going somewhere.
Oh no, they can see in 3D. Like all of this Minecraft, it's just developing the ability to see and operate in 3D. And these kids come out and they can operate like there's no tomorrow through tiny little incisions. And if you go into the modern operating room at Mass General, it looks like a big video game. It's phenomenal.
I'm going to enter, I think, a community college and take PlayStation 4 101 and get my degree. It's fair. At least they're making it practical. I mean, they're putting it to some good use. So now all of a sudden I'm proud of my sons for the these ridiculous hours they're putting into these things. Let's take a phone call. Thank you for your patience. You're on the air with Dr. David Ryan.
Hey, Ken, it's Dave, your band's biggest fan.
Hi, Dave. How are you?
I'm all right. How you doing?
I'm very good. Do you have a question for the doctor?
Yeah, actually, based on my recent situation with my dad. Actually went into the hospital for something, just kind of random pain. Ended up having some stents put in, but they discovered that he had very advanced stage 4 lung cancer, metastasized to the liver, and some bone as well. And I was just wondering, kind of more for everybody else out there, if there was an age or a test, like something they should be doing with their primary care physicians to kind of check risk, if they're at risk for something. Because 2 weeks ago we didn't know there was anything wrong with my dad at all, and now they've basically given him a couple of weeks to live.
I'm very sorry.
So if anybody can avoid this situation, any help, I'm sure will be greatly appreciated, because I wouldn't wish this on anybody.
That's a great question.
So it's a terrific question. And in fact, in particular for smokers, there is a new screening tool. So screening CT scans, or what we call lung nodule screening, has been shown to reduce the overall death rate from lung cancer. And so if you are a smoker, you should talk to your primary care doctor about getting a CT screening. So as we were saying, people with lung cancer often have these nodules present for 5+ years before they even get sick from the lung cancer, before they start coughing, before they start feeling bad in any way. And it turns out that you can pick those up with CT scans. And if you can pick up a lung cancer when it's only 1 centimeter or 2 centimeters and it hasn't spread anywhere, it's highly curable. So lung nodule screening with CT scans is actually something that works in smokers.
Dave, how old's your dad?
80.
Okay, so does he have any supplemental insurance?
He was 9 years old.
Oh, my word.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
9 years old he started smoking?
Yeah.
Wow.
Different generation.
So does he have supplemental insurance, or does he just have Medicare?
They have Blue Cross Medicare.
Oh, he has Blue Cross, okay. Because, I mean, unfortunately...
We have hospice now, and everything's paid for, actually.
I don't think I've heard a bad thing about hospice, Dave.
No, hospice is one of the great things. I wish everybody who has cancer that's incurable could be on hospice even while they were getting chemotherapy. Unfortunately, the way we pay for hospice in this country is that they get a fixed amount per day to care for your loved one when they're dying from cancer, and so you can't afford, or they can't afford, to put people on chemotherapy or radiation while they're on hospice. It's a crazy setup the way we finance it, but we actually would love to put everybody with stage 4 cancer on hospice, because you get a special visiting nurse who comes to your home and can act as the doctor's eyes and ears.
Right. Dave, I'm very sorry to hear this. You got some tough tapes coming up.
To put in another good word for hospice, they've been amazing. The nurses, you can get a hold of them 24 hours a day. Between the nurses and the home health aides, who pretty much have somebody every day coming in, so they're amazing. And it takes a special kind of person to do that kind of work. So anybody who has any doubts about it, definitely do it.
Dave, you and your family will be in my prayers. I'm very sorry that you're going through this, but hang in there and stay in touch.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll see you next weekend.
You bet. Thanks. 508-996-0500. You're on the air, and you're with Dr. David Ryan. Good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Ryan and Ken.
Hi.
Hi.
How's everybody?
Pretty good, thanks.
All right. Dr. Ryan, I'm the voice that calls the radio station on a daily basis, talks about cannabis and different things, because I've been using it for over a decade now, and I've done a lot of research in it. I've helped a lot of people understand it differently, and there is...
I was hoping you called, by the way.
Yeah, there is a lot of research that we can find at the University of UCLA, or if you if you look into a book by the name of Women in Cannabis, it was a book that was written by 2 doctors and a nurse with a master's degree. And I just let you know that a used copy of this book, it's only 172 pages, soft cover, very small book. I paid $191 for this book. And there's not too many copies of it on the planet. So what I want to have you all understand is, you all are losing a lot of respect, because we all have the answers right at our fingertips. If we use our smartphones to become smart, then what you all say is not true, There is a lot of studies since 1996 out of the University of California that shows that Rick Simpson oil and different oils that kill cancer. The fastest killer of cancer on the planet is THC. And there is much research that you can look into to learn that, and it'd be wise for both worlds to coexist. Now, today's day is different than yesterday. But
you have to understand, right now you're talking with a man who has as much understanding of the cell and how things turn cancerous and what
Oh,
fights
I do.
cancer
I understand.
in the world.
And believe me, I've had many conversations with different doctors. Every time I walk into a doctor's office with someone, we have conversation and we educate each other. I'm not. People think that I'm totally against the pharmaceutical industry and doctors and hospitals and all that. No, I know that stuff is needed.
All right, what is your question for the doctor?
My question for the doctor is in today's day and age, with for as long as cannabis has been legalized in California since '96, there's a lot of years for our medical professionals to become more intelligent and up to date with cannabis. Those of us who use it understand why you all can't. You can't profit from it. So it makes sense to me. I understand it. But when we're saving lives, it's really important to understand what kills that cell the fastest. And I promise, if you research THC oils, you will find that it's researched through science. It's not just stoners on a corner. It's not smoking it. You smoke a joint, you only get 28% of what that has.
All right, what's your question, caller?
My question is when can we start using cannabis for the medicine that it is in hospitals? When can we start really researching it to use it the way that it's a good...
So you're under the impression that there isn't any research?
Yeah, I'm under the impression that because of the way that they speak. Whenever you speak about cannabis and you say that it doesn't kill cancer and it's only good for pain and it'll make you comfortable. As soon as you say that it doesn't kill cancer, you're showing me that you have not done the research.
Right.
I am someone.
All right, I'm going to let him answer. I'm going to let him answer
Okay.
while you're off the air. Yeah, I just. Who better than you? Go ahead.
Well, it's a issue that people feel passionate about, and you get that from our caller. So, what we do know from a research perspective is that right now there's no evidence that cannabis itself is a viable treatment for your cancer.
Or the oils.
Okay. And remember, when people smoke pot or there are 100 different chemicals that are in these preparations. But it does have effects on how you feel, and it can make people feel better. And I think that's an important component. Feeling there are three legs to the stool of medicine. When you're sitting across from a patient, right? What do they want? They want the best chance at the best case scenario. And so as a physician, my job is to give that patient the best chance at the best case scenario. And that I only have three tools that I can use. I can use the best standard of care that money can buy. I can use the best experimental care that money can buy. And I can use the best supportive care that money can buy. And we talked earlier about prognostic awareness. There's only three things that I can accomplish. I can cure you, I can help you live longer, and I can help you feel better. And I think one of the areas that this whole cannabis and this call kind of brings up is that we as a medical profession probably didn't pay attention to the feel as well as you can part of that equation. And I think now with supportive care programs like hospice and supportive care programs that the palliative care physicians like Vicki Jackson bring, we're starting to understand that feeling well actually helps you live longer and live better as you're going through. So
there's some intangibles here that
there are definitely intangibles, and so I think that what the studies need to show, it's highly unlikely that cannabis, based on everything we know, is going to kill the cancer cells.
Be nice.
And I'm being nice.
No, I'm saying it would be nice.
It would be nice. But, would it be possible that cannabis helps people cope better in such a way that they can stay on therapy longer, that they can do treatment longer, that they can live longer because they're feeling better? Yeah, that's entirely possible. And those studies need to happen. And I think those studies will happen. But right now we don't have them.
I noticed that you didn't get indignant. You didn't get offended by, he implied that there's great money in cancer. And so pot would not be nearly as profitable as the research grants and all this other stuff that comes from battling cancer. You didn't get indignant. You understood the perception some have. I saw it. You can't fake that. You were okay with what he was saying.
Yeah, no. I mean, when you're not feeling well, when you're a patient and you don't feel well, you just want to feel better. And I think there's this misconception that the physician community, it usually comes up with Eastern medicine versus Western medicine. You know, if only you would listen to these Eastern medicine. I'm perfectly happy to employ any kind of medicine that is going to help my suffering patient. When you're sitting across from somebody who's suffering, it's awful to watch them suffer. You want to help them feel better. And so if there's a drug or a product or anything that's going to help somebody feel better, you want to gain access to that. But what we have to do it in a evidence-based way. We have to conduct real clinical trials that tell us this works or that doesn't work. What we can't have is just opinion, because, you know, then it's just, you know, belief or
it's
faith.
rudderless.
Yeah.
It's rudderless, and there's a great structured science to all of this. And, you know, that's why I couldn't be a doctor. Aside from the reading comprehension, science, and math, I can't be a doctor. But one of the other things, I mean, and basically, you know, when people say this, they're suggesting that, you know, you're watching these people suffer, you're watching these families suffer, the losses and the pain, and that, well, you know, I'm making a lot of money, so we'll just have to pretend that we care. It's an outrageous thing to accuse somebody of, especially somebody that's dedicated his life to saving lives.
Yeah, I mean, you know, there are components of medicine that we're not proud of, that where people did things to make money.
Of course.
And like any profession, there are components, but I think, by and large, the oncologists that I've met in my life are in it to help people feel better, live longer, and be cured more often. They're not in it to...
I mean, you keep hearing the simplistic, well, you know, it's organic, it's natural. Pot's not natural, so it's not bad. So is uranium.
Yeah, well, and the fact is the aging process and the cancer process is natural too, right? Your cells are making these mutations, and they're acquiring these mutations in bad spots in the genome.
Is it a mistake of nature?
No, not really. I don't think it's necessarily a mistake. I mean, when we think of fundamental principles of evolution, and that cancer is a disease of aging, you know, unfortunately, once you've had your children, raised your children successfully, got them to the next level so that they can have children. You know, evolution doesn't care so much about you after the age of 50. At least we don't think.
But you know, young kids get it.
Well, yeah, and so the thing about that, and what that point brings up, is that cancer is accumulating genetic mutations, enough genetic mutations in the wrong locations of your genome. And some people are born with mutations in locations that are bad. And we think that many of the childhood cancers are because those kids either inherited mutations in those areas, or they were so unlucky that just through chance they got these mutations in really bad spots of their genome that caused a cancer to grow out of control. Now, one of the good things about kids that we've learned that get cancer is that many of the cancers that kids get are highly curable, much more so than we thought 50 years ago. And so that's really been one of the tremendous breakthroughs.
Well, that's right. I mean, leukemia used to be, boy, as soon as you heard it, you know, checkmate in terms of the perception. But I think now there's a lot more confidence. If somebody's facing leukemia, childhood leukemia, there's a decent survival rate.
So many of the survival rates for the childhood cancers have gone up into the 70, 80, 90% range, and that's just a testament to clinical trials. So one of the amazing things that the pediatric community has been able to do, unlike the adult community, and we were just talking about the importance of clinical trials, is the rate at which children with cancer go on clinical trials is so much higher than adults going on clinical trials. It's actually embarrassing. But because we've gone through these clinical trials, we've been able to advance the cure rates.
You're listening to Dr. David Ryan. You've stayed an hour and a half today. I have to thank you. I wasn't sure how much time you could give us, but I'm very grateful for the time. I'm going to take one more call and take a commercial break. The book is Living with Cancer. Dr. David Ryan co-wrote this with Dr. Vicki Jackson and writer Michelle Seaton. It's a very important book, and if you're facing cancer and you have a million questions in your mind, you might not have access to Dr. Ryan, but you do, in a way, because this book answers a lot of the questions that you'll have. And they put a lot of time and thought into it, and it's a very important book. And I think a lot of us know somebody, if you don't have it yourself, you know somebody close to you that will deal with this eventually. Thanks for calling. You're on the air.
Hey, good morning, Ken. Good morning, Dr. Ryan.
Good morning.
I have a question for you. and it pertains mostly to GMOs. And I only ask this question because I'm not crazy about them, but I have a daughter who has pancreatitis, and we noticed that certain foods, if we go total organic, or aspartame for some reason really sets her off, her pancreas off. So we avoid everything with aspartame. Do you think that the problem that we have a lot of GMOs now is increasing some of the cancer that we find? Because I mean, we're consuming, I guess they say chemicals, right? Modified organisms when we're eating most of this food now.
Well, so there's two big questions in your great question, and one of them is do GMO foods, genetically modified foods, do they increase the rate of cancer? And the answer to that is no. So
no evidence yet?
No evidence yet that genetically modified foods enhance the rate of cancer. Now remember, genetically modified foods are really just a way of developing foods, developing vegetables and fruits that can withstand the environment that they're growing in. And so we're eating the proteins and carbohydrates and fats, and these are natural products. They're just when we create a specific breed or a specific strain, we're kind of doing the same thing as genetically modifying them. We're just doing it in a way of kind of Mendelian genetics, where you're crossbreeding different organisms. But your question also brings up: are there certain chemicals in the environment which are separate from GMOs? But
aspartame was one of the ones he gave.
Yeah, aspartame. That are those causing different illnesses? And the answer is probably, but we don't know which they are, and it takes very careful epidemiologic studies to try and tease out which of those chemicals, the newer chemicals that are getting into the environment, which of them might be cancer causing. And only over the course of time will we figure it out. But the problem is the anecdote, the N of one, where you have one anecdote of somebody getting sick from something. It's really hard to figure out why that person got sick from that in that one individual case.
You need a bigger sampling.
You need a huge sampling.
Okay.
Yeah.
Steve, is that good?
Yes, thank you very much.
You bet. Yeah, I think aspartame actually, I think they concluded there are links to cancer.
Well, so if you take any of these, not any of them, but a chemical like aspartame or saccharin, the artificial sweeteners, you give enough to rats, you can cause harm. The question is does the human take in that much chemical, right? If you take in almost any chemical in excess, you're going to get sick from it.
Now, I'm going to go off the trail just for a moment here. I was told that some of these sugar-free substitutes actually get your body to react the same way, so you're not really going to lose weight, or because the caloric intake was less, it tricks the body in a way that it's going to react the same. You ever run across that?
Yeah, it's not my area of expertise, so I don't know a ton about it, but basically from a nutritional standpoint, for most of us, what the nutritionist would say is that calories in equals calories out. And so while there are special circumstances that people have with regards to either gaining too much weight or being obese, because we have to counsel patients now after a diagnosis of cancer of, okay, how do you get into a normal weight? In general, for most patients, it's about restricting the number of calories that you're taking in. The big debate, of course, is what group of foods can those calories be in? Are they in carbohydrates? How much are in carbos? How much are in fats? And how much are in proteins? And that you'd have to talk to a nutritionist.
Are there foods that you would recommend we stay away from, in particular, with reaction to the cancers that you're specifically involved with?
Well, in general, what we found, general advice is that a Mediterranean diet, so lower in animal fats, is good for you. Lower in animal fats, higher in natural products, vegetables, olive oil, that kind of thing. So a Mediterranean diet, high in fish, that's far better for you than a Western diet, steak.
I'm in trouble.
Steak and eggs and that kind of thing.
All right. Well, in order to try to stay lean, we go to a high protein diet around here, and maybe that's not a great idea. All right. Well, that's interesting. I don't think we learned anything from that. I think that's been the prevailing knowledge for a few years now, right?
The main thing for most people is try and stay within the weight that you're supposed to for your height, and a lot of folks will say, okay, when you were 18 years old, remember what you weighed when you were 18. Unless you were an overweight child or overweight young adult, remember what you weighed when you were 18. That's probably the weight you're meant to be at. And there are charts that you can look up based on your height of what weight you're supposed to be, and try and stay within 10% of that weight. And that really, we have found for most cancers, almost every cancer that we have, solid tumor, as opposed to the leukemias and lymphomas, but for most of the solid tumors, being overweight is a significant risk factor for cancer.
And that is correctable.
And that's correct. Well,
for a lot of people.
For a lot of people, it's correctable. For some people, it's really hard,
right.
and they have to go to a specialist to try and make that happen.
And, of course, the smoking, I mean, if you're smoking today, I mean, what I say to smokers is, why invest in death? It's free.
Yeah. Yeah, no, smoking, please stop. And no tanning beds. The other thing is, melanoma is on the rise. No tanning beds, and wear your sunscreen and reapply. And then go to your PCP, go to your primary care physician, and get the appropriate screening test that you're supposed to get.
So is the understanding of melanoma somewhat new? Because it seems as though I didn't hear about it an awful lot, and I've had family members die of cancer over the years. I mean, is it something that maybe the cancer started because of melanoma? It was never diagnosed years ago?
I think as people spend more time in the sun and people have more leisure time, melanoma is getting diagnosed more. It's one of the faster growing cancers that's out there, and yeah. I think it's related to people we know it's related to sun exposure. So the more sun exposure that people have, probably because we have more leisure time in our world. Also, the tanning beds didn't help. There was an epidemic of tanning beds where a lot of kids would go and do this over the course of several years before they kind of got addicted to it in a way. It turns out that when you're out in the sun, you're releasing natural endorphins that make you feel better. And evolutionary-wise, there's a physician up at Mass General who's a world expert in the science of melanoma and in the treatment of melanoma, David Fisher, who explains this far better than I can. But essentially, we were meant to get out in the sun to get our vitamin D levels up, and so it's a natural evolutionary way that the sun made us feel good. Well, you only need about 15 minutes of sun exposure per day to get your vitamin D, but we all love to get out in the sun and feel good, and the reason is it creates natural endorphins.
So make sure your sunscreen, clothing, and
clothing. Limit the exposure time of your skin to the sun, because that's like it's as simple as wearing your seatbelt.
Man, I love the beach and I love steak and cheese subs, so I'm in trouble. I better keep an eye on things. Dr. David Wright, I want to thank you so much for staying as long as you did, not just for coming in, but you stayed an extended period of time, and I realize how important every day is for you. So,
I just want to say that New Bedford has been very important to my family. I love New Bedford, the people of the South Coast. It's just the greatest place on the planet. I think you guys have the best kept secret in Massachusetts, and I love the place and I love the people, and it's been a great part of my life.
A lot of New Yorkers find their way here eventually.
The smart ones, right?
Yeah, that's right. But I agree, because I didn't grow up down on the South Coast, but I brag about it. I just love it down here.
No, it's terrific, and it's just a wonderful community.
The book is Living with Cancer. You can get it at Amazon.com. You can get it at Barnes & Noble and other bookstores. And Dr. David Ryan and Dr. Vicki Jackson provided the information, and it was helped out with the writing of Michelle Seaton, so that you can understand a lot of the things that they talk about in a way that the layperson can understand. And there's a million answers to a lot of these questions. Maybe not a million, but there's an awful lot of answers to the questions you will have if you or somebody that is close to you is diagnosed with cancer. So grateful that you could come in today.
Thanks very much.
All right. I'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to AM 1420 WBSM. The Ken Pittman Show continues, and we're here until noontime. Do not go away. We'll be back. 508-996-0500 is the call-in line, and your calls are more than welcome.
Easter is coming, and